This episode of All About the Gear is brought to you by BorrowLenses.com.
All right, we're here recording. What are we on? We're on episode number 7 of All About the Gear. I'm here with Mr. Doug Kaye, the man that has all the answers about every camera that was ever made, or at least the ones that Borrow Lenses so graciously lets us borrow.
Thank you, Frederick. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too, man. So you had a chance to sit down or stand up and run around with the Fuji X-E1 camera. Yeah, that thing. And this is Fuji's. So Fuji, this is an interchangeable camera. This is not the X100S or the X100. This is the bigger brother to those with an interchangeable lens mount for the what is the lenses that go on that thing?
These are the X mount lenses. The Fuji X mount, it's an APS-C sensor, so it's a 1.5 factor crop sensor. And for those of you who know the X100S, which is really popular, that's got a fixed focal length lens. It's a little complicated. The X-E1 is about a year old. That's what we've got here today because we could get one. The X-E2 is going to be shipping just about the time this show is available. And that,
so this is more of a preview. This is a preview of the older technology, and then when we get that one, we can talk about the deltas and the contrast between old and new, right?
Right. I think we know what they are, and but I think the way to look at this is the equivalent of the X100S, but with interchangeable lenses.
Okay, and people love, myself included. I still continue to lust after an X100S, but that camera, the X100S, and even the X100, have like this rabid following of people that just love that camera. And I just heard a couple days ago that Fuji. So the X100 is no longer in production. You can't even buy them from Fuji anymore, but they released a firmware update for it, adding things like focus peaking to it, which is pretty awesome. Instead of saying, hey, if you want focus peaking, go buy the X100S, they are enhancing an out-of-print model, so to speak. So does this guy, the X-E1, have all that kind of magic in it, like the focus peaking and all that magic?
This particular one has wimpy focus peaking, and my understanding is the X-E2 is better. Yeah, it's not very bright. It's only white. And so, the problem with white focus peaking lines is they look like highlights. So I think a lot of us like to turn it to red or something like that.
Right.
But let me say one thing about Fuji and firmware upgrades. Fuji is really good, much better than any of the other manufacturers. They actually make their products better with new features. And one of the things that they've announced is that they've come up with firmware upgrades for the lenses, the X-mount lenses that Fuji makes, so that when they go to the X-E2, the new version, they'll be able to take advantage of the new phase detection autofocus.
Cool. Fuji's
really good about that. I wish other manufacturers were even close to what they do.
Yeah. I mean, that's great, and it's crazy how, like I was saying, the fan base that Fuji's building with these cameras. It's almost like Fuji, kind of, I don't want to say they invented it, but they at least popularized the whole idea of these retro-looking small cameras that are highly capable and just sort of do everything you need to do. Now we're seeing other folks like, larger or different camera manufacturers come on board with their retro offerings. So this X-E2 is coming. When is the X-E2 coming? Is it imminent?
It's supposed to ship mid-November, which is just days away from the time we were recording this.
Okay, good. So that's perfect. So we'll have a look at this. Then you'll get your hands on that one, and then we'll talk about them side by side. So let's talk about lenses. We talked about lenses a little bit the X mount that goes on that thing. I've got some notes here of things I want to ask you. What is the quality of those lenses? I mean, do you feel like they're sharp? Are they Leica sharp, or are they just okay? How do you feel about it?
Well, Leica sharp is unfair because Leica sharp is really sharp, and Leica is really expensive. So it's just not a fair comparison. These lenses range in price from maybe $400 up to $1,000 or $1,100. So they're nowhere in the same category. But these lenses are excellent for this camera. And let me just say, I love this camera. It's not a camera I'm going to buy, and we'll talk about why in a little bit. But I love the camera. I understand the excitement about Fuji. Fuji is is doing things in a way that's just a little different. You know, they have their X-trans sensor that doesn't use the same pattern of pixels as other people do. That's turned out to be a pretty good thing for them. Their controls are a little different, but when you look at them, you say, yeah, but that makes more sense. I'm glad they didn't follow it the way everybody else does it, because they've made it better.
Yeah.
So anyway, lenses. Yeah, the lenses on this are great, and I learned a lot about these lenses. First of all, you've got all the Fuji lenses that you can get. The kit lens is an 18-55, and it's surprisingly good. And I would recommend, unusually, that people buy the kit lens with this, because it only adds $200 to the X-E1 and I think $300 to the X-E2. So the kit lens, 18-55, very nice lens.
How fast is that, the kit lens? That
is an f 2.8 to 4. So it's going to be f4 at 55 millimeter.
Okay.
Good lens. I ended up using it quite a bit. Now, the big difference in the lenses here is that you've got Zeiss lenses. Zeiss is making some really nice lenses called the TWiP, the TOUIT lenses, for the APS-C cameras, for the Fujis and for the Sony NEXs. Exact same lenses, same sensor sizes, so you're going to get very similar results. The Fujis cost more than the equivalent. I'm sorry, the Zeisses cost a little more than the equivalent Fujis. So let's get the camera out of the way here and take a look at two, for example. Here is we'll play shuffling lenses. This is a Zeiss 12 millimeter, which I absolutely loved. I wrote about this and I called it a fun lens, and then I read some other reviews and they also called it a fun lens because it's really a kick. 12 millimeter, it's pretty wide, so that's the equivalent of an 18 on a full frame sensor.
Beautiful. So you're doing landscape and all that.
Oh, you know what this is for? This is for getting up close to some foreground object and making it look really wild relative to the background. Now, compare that to this. Now, they look like they're hugely different in size. That's the diameter at the front. This other one on the right is the Fuji 14 millimeter. And I was going to say it's a toss-up. The 14 is not quite as fun to shoot with as the Zeiss 12. But here's the difference. The Fuji is a little bit cheaper. The Zeiss, of course, has this really fat thing on the front. So it takes a huge filter, like a 67 millimeter filter. But it's this Fuji lens that got the firmware upgrade. So what we don't know yet is whether or not these Zeiss lenses are going to be able to take advantage of the better autofocus in the X-E2. Whereas we know that the Fuji lenses that are XF lenses, and that's, you may be able to see a little red XF right there.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
This lens was going to be able to take advantage of it because of the upgrade that's coming in the camera. So that's a choice there. If it were me today, I'd buy the 14 millimeter from Fuji and not the 12 from Zeiss. Now let's take a look at it. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Here's a Zeiss 32 f1.8, real nice lens. Loved shooting with this one too. But there's a Fuji 35 millimeter instead of this 32 that, again, I would probably buy for this camera simply because, again, of the firmware upgrade. Now, it may be that these Fujis are the Zeisses are upgradable too. I don't know yet.
Yeah.
Finally, the last lens I worked with, I also liked a lot. This is a Fuji 60 millimeter f2.4 macro.
Nice.
And so I like this little thing. I mean, again, let's take a look at this. You have to see what the size of these things is.
And you're going to give me some shots, right? That
this time I got some good ones. Sometimes we do these reviews, and my shots aren't very good. But this camera, I got a lot of good images that we'll put in.
Cool.
So this is the 60 millimeter macro. You see it's still not very big.
Yeah.
I mean, here's what do we compare? I've got the camera museum here. Here's the Sony NEX with the big zoom lens on it, the 18-200. You can see that's a monster by comparison.
Yeah, move that. Yeah, there you go. I can see it.
Right. So the NEX body's about the same size, but that lens is huge. Here's just because we can. Here's one that we're working on for an upcoming show. That is the Sony RX100 Model 2.
Yeah.
As you can see, that is a teeny little camera. Right, so that's
it is.
tiny.
Look at that. Okay.
Cute. So that's going to be fun. Anyway, that's it for the lenses. So I like the Fuji lenses on this thing.
So price-wise of those lenses, what are we looking at? You know, just a general range.
Yeah, I got to look at my notes here. Let's see. The 12 millimeter Zeiss is $1,000. These are street prices. The Fuji 14 millimeter is $900, so you only save $100 there. The Zeiss 32 millimeter is about $720. Where's the Fuji 35? Oh, the Fuji 35 I didn't test, and I don't have the price on it, but I'm sure it's cheaper than the Zeiss.
But we're in that 700 to 1,000.
It's 600. Yeah, the Fuji 35 is $600, and again, based on what I've heard, I would probably go with that. This 60 millimeter that's on there is, I don't know how much that is. I don't have the price on that, but it's probably.
So what about price-wise on this? This is the Fuji X-E1 we're looking at. The X-E2 is coming out shortly. What's going to be the price difference between those two?
$300. So the X-E2 is $1,300 with the kit lens. It's not a cheap camera, you know, you're getting up there, but this is a camera for a fairly serious photographer who wants a good, easy to carry around camera.
So that's a good segue into. Okay, great. You know, it's a good, easy to carry around camera, but devil's advocate would say, okay, for $1,300, I could jump into a decent entry level or even highly capable DSLR. Why wouldn't I go that route instead of going with this guy?
Because you'd be carrying around a big DSLR. Now, for that price, you're not going to go full frame. You're going to go APS-C in a Nikon. You're going to get a 70D, or you're going to get a Nikon D7100, maybe close to that price range. Not quite. I don't think you can get those things at $1,300 with a kit lens.
You're right.
But you know, maybe the step down from the top crop frame sensor. The fact is, you got to look at the images. Now, of course, what we tell everybody is go out to borrow lenses and rent these things and try them. I think you'll be impressed. At this point, I wouldn't buy any camera without trying it. Having said that, I won't talk about the Sony I just ordered. But
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, but this the images from this are great. It's a heck of a lot more. It's easier to shoot with. It's more fun to shoot with, and you will get great images from this Fuji. At this point, I'm not going to buy another SLR. They're just too big, and we're at the point where unless you need that, the really fast focusing, you need the rapid frame rate. Why? These are so much nicer.
What other camera out there is sort of a direct competitor with this body and the upcoming X-E2?
Yeah, the closest thing, I happen to have one here. The closest thing is the NEX6.
Okay.
All right. So the Sony NEX6 is cheaper than the Fuji by a fair amount. Image quality is about the same, but even though I own a bunch of these Sony bodies and a whole lot of Sony lenses, it is not as nice a camera. The Fuji is easier to use, better controls, and the image quality is at least as good as the current batch of NEX cameras.
And so, speaking of controls, how's that UI? Because I know, on previous shows we talked about the Sony user interface not being exactly what you need in terms of getting around quickly. What about the Fuji? How does the Fuji feel in your hands?
Well, it feels great. The controls, again, are a little different, and let's talk about them because they're very nice to use.
Mm-hmm.
First off, you don't have a PASM dial, program, aperture, shutter, manual dial. That's easy to get to by pushing a button on the back. But what you do have is you have Fuji's great controls. You have a shutter speed dial, so you can select your shutter speed, or A for let the camera pick the shutter speed. You have your aperture, select your aperture, or A for let the camera pick the aperture. If you put them both in A, you've got automatic. If you select an aperture, you've got aperture priority. If you select a shutter only, then you've got shutter priority. And if you select them both, you've got manual. So it's very, very straightforward.
That's cool. I kind of like that. It just, of course, that seems so obvious when you look at it like that.
Yeah.
You don't have to explicitly say, I want to be in aperture priority mode and then go set your aperture. By virtue of the fact that you're changing the aperture, it's going to assume that, yes, you want to be in aperture priority mode, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's the kind of thing, if someone had never heard of aperture priority or shutter priority, they could come to this and get it intuitively much more quickly than if they had to be taught this by somebody, because we've got this concept of aperture priority. Mm-hmm. And then you've got your exposure compensation, which of course comes into every mode except full automatic. No, it does full automatic, except the manual, sorry. So the controls are nice. Also, very important for me, because I like to shoot manual focus a lot, is that let me put this in the right place here, the focus mode is here on the front of the camera, and that's for manual, continuous, or single shot autofocus. Really good location for that. The back, as I've said, has a non-tiltable LCD, unfortunately. Let me turn it on here.
Yeah. Well, so pause on that for a second. Non-tiltable LCD. So a tiltable LCD, like you find on, say, the Panasonic GX, the GX that I have. You know, it's awesome.
Yeah, the GX7, right?
The GX7, thank you. Brain is hungry for lunch. But the GX7 has a tiltable LCD. Some of the NEX cameras have the tiltable LCD on there, so you can do down low or up high shooting. This has nothing on it. And I think the tiltable LCD is a good first step, but cameras like the GH3 with the fully articulated LCD that pops out, that you can aim forward for selfies and recording yourself on video and all that, that seems like the way to go. Why do you think this camera doesn't have anything on it? And then secondly, X-E2, are they going to correct that?
Okay, why? I don't know. Ask Fuji.
Come on, you're Doug Kaye. You know everything.
I don't know. I mean, to give you an idea of what Frederick's talking about here, here's an NEX camera where you can tilt up so you can shoot from below. Yep. From above, you can tilt it down 45 degrees and shoot from below. The GX7 from Panasonic Lumix, as Frederick mentioned, you can fully articulate, swivel it out, do it all sorts of crazy angles, shoot from the other direction. It's great.
No, the GH3, not the GX7. The GH3 you can. The GX7,
okay.
The GX7 is just
right.
like
You're
that.
Right. You're right. I'm thinking. I've got so many cameras. I'm thinking
all these numbers.
It was the Canon 70D, which is a show we're about to record. Also, the 70D has that fully articulating screen from Canon. Yeah. So I get confused.
And not to burst your bubble at all. I know you just ordered Sony cameras, but it doesn't have the articulated screen either.
No,
so.
I know.
But, it has up and down, but not lateral.
The big thing for me and other people with gray hair is being able to shoot from very low angles without having to get on your knees.
Yeah.
Because once you get on your knees...
Getting on your knees is easy. It's the getting up part.
Getting up, right. It can't be done. So I love... and I need a viewfinder. I love viewfinders. I don't normally use the rear LCD except for those high and low angle shots. Okay, so in answer to your second question, my understanding is the X-E2 is the same. It is a non-tiltable, non-articulating screen. What's up with that?
Why? Yeah, what's up with that? I
don't know.
That's going to be a continuing theme in the show. What's up with that?
Yeah.
Come on, really? Is it that hard?
And I'll save the last bit for the punchline of the show. But here is the rear of the camera. It's one of the cameras that... I got to switch my camera on. There we go. It's like many cameras these days, it has a quick button for a quick menu, right? Mm-hmm. And the quick menu is pretty good except for one thing. I keep wanting to touch it. I keep wanting to change it by touching it.
No touch screen.
No touch screen. What's up with that?
What's up with that?
So the fact is that once you touch it and it doesn't work, you say, okay, so I move this little thing around and I pick the thing I want, and I want my ISO, and then I can go in there and I can change
2012. I mean, come on.
It is. So here I am, changing my ISO if the camera would focus, my webcam. There we go.
There it goes. Okay.
All right, so I can focus and I can, change that. So that's the quick menu. It's a good quick menu because it's not too cluttered, because the spaces are pretty big. So it works fine. Everything important is there. And I like quick menus.
But screens, man. I mean, we've been programmed, for better or for worse, with these smartphones. When you see a screen with data on it, you're a monkey, and you want to, like with this one, you're like, oh, of course I can touch it. And
but I got to tell you, we're going to get mail about this from people who don't want touch screens. They don't want articulating screens. And all I can say to these people is, when we started doing All About the Gear only about 6 months ago, I was not a fan of touch screens. A year ago, I didn't think I needed an articulating screen. Mm-hmm. Touch screens were for mobile phones. Who wants them on a camera? Well, once you start using them, you realize they have some tremendous advantages. So now they've become sort of a must-have feature for at least my cameras of choice.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I totally agree. Yeah. What
so
about Wi-Fi? Does that thing have Wi-Fi on it at least?
this does not have any Wi-Fi or NFC. The X-E2 has Wi-Fi only for image transfer, so you can probably move images to your mobile device and might go to Flickr or something like that. I don't know, but it does not have remote control through Wi-Fi, as I understand it.
Okay.
So
What's up with
it's
that?
limited. What's up with that? Yeah, and that's something probably a ways down the road we'll start to miss on cameras that don't have it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Interesting. Wow. So
yeah.
what about the files out of that thing, Doug? Are you happy with the quality of the files that come off the sensor? Are they beautiful? Are they meh? What do you think?
No, they're great. They're gorgeous. One thing you have to do if you're using Lightroom, Adobe Camera Raw, any of these kinds of things, you have to make sure that you're using a current version of the raw processor, because they're not normal Bayer pattern sensors, and you can look that up on Wikipedia if you want to. The raw files are unusual, and if you don't have your application set, you can end up with really, really huge files once you transfer them in. Once you do it correctly and get the proper raw processor, they're reasonably sized like any other raw file. They look good. One of the things I really like about Fuji cameras, and we talked about this with the X100S show also, is that Fuji, as a film manufacturer, also has film emulation modes.
Cool.
Now, you can use these two ways. If you're shooting RAW plus JPEG, you can make your JPEG something like black and white. You can make your JPEG Velvia, which is sort of a Kodachrome type film, nice saturated colors. Or if you shoot JPEG only, you can actually do film style bracketing. So you can get 3 images for every shot in 3 different film presets. And these are a lot of fun. Again, I used to think I would never use something like that, because I always do so much post-processing. But when you go out and you shoot with the camera's version of black and white, or you shoot Velvia, you get home and you say, this is not a critical shot. I'm not going to spend an hour in post-production. I want the JPEG. I want to share it with my friends. I want to put it on Google+, Facebook, Flickr, and so forth. And
making it quicker. But do you get the raw file too? Does it just make you a JPEG?
If you do raw plus JPEG, which you can configure, you can get 1 film emulation mode. If you go JPEG only, you can get 3 emulation modes, which I don't typically do. But you got the backup. You got the raw file. You can do anything you want with that. Okay. But I like that. The files look really good out of the camera, JPEG or RAW, and the raw files have everything you would want in terms of dynamic range and color balance and everything.
Love it. One of the other things we were talking about before we started recording was the histogram on that thing. You said you really, really loved it.
Right, this is, I'm glad you remembered, because I would have forgotten, Frederick. Okay. But this is way in the category of what's up with that. So I'm one of these guys who learned, shoot to the right when you're shooting digital. Push your histogram to the right. You want to make sure that as much of your data is in the highlight portion of your image, but not blown out. And so I like to be able to see a live histogram when I shoot. This has a histogram. Thank you very much. It's not an RGB histogram. It doesn't show you red, green, and blue separately, which is handy. We could talk about that someday, but it's there. The problem is it's wrong. What happens is when you're looking,
it's awesome looking. It's just
wrong. when you're looking at the LCD or through the electronic viewfinder, you see the histogram, but the image in the viewfinder or LCD is automatically adjusted to look good so that you can focus and compose. The problem is that the histogram is adjusted also to make it look good. So you're basically seeing the histogram of an image that has nothing to do with the image you're about to capture. They have an exposure meter in there. The exposure meter is accurate. It goes up and down as you change the aperture. But in this camera, as you change the aperture in manual mode, the histogram stays the same because it compensates. This is the same on the X100S. It was the same on the X100. I think it's also on the X Pro 1. What's up with that?
So what good? What useful data does that give you if it's sliding all over the place and compensating?
No, it's telling you that it's saying, if I were to do the exposure, I would get it right. But you've chosen something, and you're probably going to get it wrong. So I don't know.
It's a braggogram, not a histogram.
And I thought I was crazy, so I went online and searched around. Well, I'm not the only one. Everybody is as outraged about this as I am. So I'm not the first one to discover this, but it is totally whacked. And this is something I gotta believe Fuji could fix in one of those firmware upgrades because they've got the data. It's in the exposure thing. So thank you for remembering that.
Sure.
That's like one of my two big gripes with this camera.
So that's all I have on my list. What else do you have in terms of things that people should know about this camera?
First of all, if you want to shoot video, this is not a good camera for video. It shoots 1080p, but only at 24 frames a second. The X-E1, however, does a much better job with video. Haven't used it, can't tell you firsthand, but this is not a good video camera, so stay away from that.
What about mic? What about sound, audio input?
Yeah, good question. This has, why don't I just look, because I can't remember. I have the problem.
Drum roll, please.
Yeah, I got too many things. This has a mic input. I believe it's a stereo mic input, but I'm not sure.
Oh, so it does have a mic input.
Yeah, okay. But no headphone out, so you don't have that.
Okay, but at least it has a mic input.
Yeah, well, it's a mic input for something that doesn't shoot good video, so, you know.
Right, okay, yeah.
Let's hope the X-E1 has both a stereo mic input and headphone output. That would be nice.
Right.
The other thing, let's see, I'm just going to look through the list here. Oh, something I really like about this. This camera, when you use the proper lenses, has a hyperfocal scale in the viewfinder. X100S had this too, as well as in the EVF, the electronic viewfinder. So let me bring up something here. Let me go to manual focus in particular, because that's where it shows up.
Switch the camera so we can see it.
Oh, thank you. That would be helpful.
There you go.
All right. So at the bottom there, you see a blue bar. And if my webcam will focus, which eventually will, all right?
Wait for it. There it is.
So as I focus, you see this little white section is moving, right? And because I'm at a certain aperture, it's not that big. But as I come down here, all right, that's not a good demo. Let's do this. Let's change the aperture to f22. Ha! That'll show us a much bigger depth of field, right?
There we go. That's
Should. Well, believe me, this works really well under normal circumstances. All right.
When it's not shooting gray, right?
Yeah, something. Anyway, in manual focus, what that is a hyperfocal distance, just like the hyperfocal markings you'd have on the lens. It shows you what distance you're focused at, and it shows you in that white band what range of things is going to be in focus. And I realize now the reason is that I've got the 60 millimeter on there instead of the kit lens. If I had the kit lens, we could. All right, let's give it one more try. Will it work? There it is, much clearer. So you see how that changes?
Yep.
What I'm doing now is I'm changing the aperture, and as I go to tighter and tighter apertures, my depth of field increases.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Right, yeah. And as I change my focal distance, now I'm focusing closer and closer and closer. And you see in the white area what my actual focusing distance is. But if I change the aperture again, I can
it's squeezing down.
Look how narrow that depth of field is. Now as I open up the aperture, my depth of field gets wider.
Well, so it went from an eyelash to the nose between the ear to the entire head.
Right. And now I was a little concerned because I didn't know how to get depth of field preview. There is a little function button up here in the corner, an FN button. But I like to program that for ISO, for quickly changing ISO, which meant I couldn't use it for depth of field preview. But it turns out that if you press the shutter release halfway, the magic halfway, then you actually see a depth of field preview.
Oh, cool.
As well as everything else that it does. So really, really nicely done. So anyway, I think we've covered pretty much everything. We've talked about the competition.
So then the last question is always the last question in these shows, and the bottom line. Should I go rush out and buy one of these or what?
I'll tell you, if you want a camera that's more portable than a DSLR, if you do not need a tilt or articulating LCD, get the X-E2, not the X-E1. I think you're going to be really happy with this. If this had the tiltable LCD, I would probably sell my NEX cameras and switch to Fuji. It's that good.
Wow.
And I have a fair investment in those NEX bodies and lenses.
Even considering the one that's in the mail on the way to you right now?
Well, that's a full-frame camera, and I'm not going to be able to use many of the lenses because in crop mode they're going to be pretty small images. But I love this camera. And people who have it love this camera. It is, if you used an X Pro 1, this is a great improvement over the X Pro 1. If you use the old X100, it's a great improvement over that. If you love the X100S but wish you could change lenses, this is your camera.
Cool. All right. Well, then we have our recommendation. I think what I'm hearing is that camera is awesome. Hold off for the X-E2, which is coming out in a couple of weeks.
Couple
right?
of days.
A couple days, and it's only going to be a couple $100 more. So if you can swing that, it behooves you to wait for the enhanced version.
And I think I would opt for the Fuji lenses over the Zeiss, because I think they're just about as good. They're a little cheaper, and we know for sure that they're firmware compatible with the improved autofocus of the X-E2.
Got it. So that's a great review, and my next question would be, what's next on All About the Gear? What are we going to be talking about?
Oh, we're having fun.
In the coming weeks. I know we don't want to talk about what's exactly next, but what's in the range?
No, let's talk exactly. We won't give the schedule because we're so unpredictable, but it's we're going to be looking at the Lumix GX7, which is somewhere around behind you there, I think.
It is in the bag over there, yeah.
We're going to look at the Canon 70D, which is got some amazing new autofocus technology, sensor-based autofocus technology, great for video. Cool. We're going to look at that Sony RX100 Model 2, which I just showed you. We've got a whole bunch of good stuff coming up. It is quite a year. You just got back from the Photo Expo show in New York, and it was quite a year for announcements, except for the big guys. I guess
Nikon did release that DF, so there's that.
Yeah, I thought about that. That's a funky camera. Well, maybe we'll get one of those too and take a look at that. Yes, we should get one. We'll see if Borrow Lenses gets them in. So very good. Cool. Doug, thank you again. It's been awesome. Thank you. So that's another episode of All About the Gear in the Can. Thank you, Frederick. All right. See you later. Bye-bye.